Far more than we think. Making Sense of Spirituality by Angelo. Chapter 15. Life Can Be a Pain. All of us experience emotional and physical pain in our lives, and often it seems that we get far more than our share. Emotional pain such as grief, sadness, jealousy, guilt and regret can have a devastating effect on our experience of life. Emotional pain can trigger depression and other mental health issues, which then become debilitating. Sometimes even wonderful experiences are completely overshadowed by emotional pain, and life becomes something to endure rather than enjoy. The same can be true for physical pain, when chronic long-term conditions impact to such an extent that life can seem intolerable. Life certainly can be a pain. The thing is, though, emotional pain and physical pain are inevitable parts of life and are natural phenomena that can't be avoided. We go to great lengths to try to avoid pain when in truth it's unavoidable. Without wishing to underplay the pain that any individual may be experiencing, it is nevertheless generally the case that it's how we deal with pain that directly affects our experience of it. It's not unreasonable to feel grief at the loss of a loved one, or sadness at the end of a relationship, and these emotions arise in us automatically. It's thought that sadness actually serves a purpose, and that it generally causes us to slow down and gives us time to focus on solving any problems that arise as a result of the triggering event. Our negative reaction to sadness stems from the fact that it doesn't feel good, and also from our cultural conditioning. We seek to avoid it, cover it up, medicate it, and generally try to make it go away. We don't like feeling sad, and it's painful for us to see other people experiencing sadness. Our reaction to emotional pain is resistance, despite the fact that it very likely has a useful purpose. And physical pain is a key component of the sense of touch, both internal and external. Physical pain tells the brain that there's something wrong in a particular area of the body, so that remedial action can be taken. It's the body's warning system that stress, strain, or disease is happening and should be avoided or healed in order to maintain well-being. Without physical pain, we would have no compass to direct us away from harm, and we would quickly become damaged and unhealthy. However, as with emotional pain, we don't like the experience of physical pain and seek to avoid it or medicate it as soon as possible. Avoiding pain makes sense, but medicating it can be harmful if we then fail to address the underlying cause. One thing we do know is that all pain, whether emotional or physical, is experienced in the brain. Studies have shown that emotional and physical pain share much the same neural circuitry, and this may explain why emotional pain can be experienced physically in the body. Anyone who has experienced literal heartache will know this to be true, but of course even an aching heart is ultimately experienced in the brain. Given that all pain exists in our brains, a change in the way our minds work ought to be able to mitigate pain and to some extent keep the sensations right-sized. As mentioned briefly in the previous chapter, it's not so much pain itself that causes our suffering, but that suffering is caused by our resistance to pain. It is this resistance to pain that causes a bigger problem, just as it is our resistance to anything in life that causes us to be unhappy. Resistance is futile because we are resisting what already is. Resistance is effectively our ego saying that we find what is happening to us to be unacceptable. In some cases, resistance causes a contracted state of being, which actually makes the pain worse. We can, of course, take action to change the conditions we dislike, but those actions may or may not be successful. And in any case, future action does not change the present moment. The pain being experienced in the present moment serves a purpose and cannot be made to disappear. So, a better approach must be for the mind to accept it for now and not cause suffering through resistance. That which we resist persists, so it's preferable for us to let it go if we can. I heard an expression the other day, quote, "We should name it, claim it, and tame it," close quote. If we name the pain and claim it as our own, then we're in a much better position to tame it than if we resist. It's a delusion to believe that mental resistance will combat an unwanted feeling of pain. Resistance makes it worse, so a more effective response is to accept pain, seek professional help if deemed necessary, learn whatever it is that the pain is trying to tell us, and then take the appropriate action. The really helpful action would be to address the underlying cause rather than the pain itself. It's also good to remember that, as with all things, in many cases this too shall pass. Quote, "Impermanence is a characteristic of every condition and situation that you will ever encounter." Close quote. Gautama Siddhartha, the founder of Buddhism. At the risk of irritating those of you who suffer with chronic emotional or physical pain, there is a further aspect to cover here, which is that pain can be seen as a touchstone for growth. Pain in life is unavoidable, but we have a choice as to whether to suffer or to use it as fuel to drive our next phase of spiritual development. The best indicator of spiritual progress is how we deal with difficulties, and these situations often arise in the form of pain. We will either revert to fear-based ego or take a further step along the spiritual path. This comes down to a matter of choice. Indulging in self-pity and constantly retelling and reliving painful problems in our minds will keep us stuck in suffering. The victim mentality includes a belief that past events define who we are today, and this makes the past unreasonably powerful. This preoccupation with past events prevents us from seeing the light of our own spirit. We know acceptance is key to achieving freedom from the mind, but sometimes we're so attached to our stories of victimhood that we're reluctant to let go of our familiar unhappy selves. Well, miracles of healing can occur when those who are in pain awaken to their innate spirituality. Pain, illness, loss, and other difficulties can be the catalyst for increased willingness to embrace spiritual principles. And when this happens, amazing things can occur. Suffering can be seen as the fire that burns away our ego. In these circumstances, we surrender and start to trust that conditions will gradually improve once we decide to go along with the natural flow of life instead of resisting it. As we notice improvement, we become full of gratitude and humility, and so starts the incredible upward spiral of spiritual growth. Things will get better and better, but the danger comes when we feel so much improved that we start to forget where our growth came from in the first place. our ego starts to reappear. We allow our self-will and resistance back into the picture, and sooner or later we experience another dose of pain, perhaps even more severe than before. The lessons of life keep on coming until we are ready to finally surrender and let it all go once and for all. My own experience of pain and suffering relates mainly to addiction, and we will be covering addictions in more detail later, but it's interesting to note at this stage that all addictions often initially arise out of our reluctance to come to terms with our emotional or physical pain. We try to medicate pain away using a variety of substances or behaviours, but eventually these things become a subconscious habit, and we experience being chemically or behaviourally dependent upon them. As opposed to the upward spiral of spirituality, addiction is a fearful downward spiral into hell on earth, and it claims the lives of many people. Addiction causes untold suffering, not only to the victims, but to their families and friends. The life certainly can be a pain, but we have the choice at any time to choose a different way of dealing with it in our minds. It's been my experience that despair can eventually lead to freedom and joy. If we define suffering as resistance to pain and grace as a blessing from spirit, it's possible to see how suffering can be seen as grace. This may not seem immediately apparent, but as we've seen before, it's all a matter of perspective and perception.